Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. You know how sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying a story so powerful that if people only knew, they'd never dare to laugh the same way again? Well, today's story is exactly that kind of moment, the kind that starts with mockery and ends with absolute silence, the kind where one simple gesture changes everything. It all began on the 12th floor of a modern glass office building, a place filled with sharp suits, louder egos, and people who measured worth by titles and appearances. The company had just landed a massive government contract, something related to aviation systems, which meant new consultants, new meetings, and new faces walking through the halls. That morning, as employees gathered near the elevators, they noticed him. He didn't look like the others. His clothes were simple, not worn out, but clearly not tailored, a plain shirt, clean but old jeans instead of dress pants, and in his arms, he carried a small backpack decorated with cartoon planes. Beside him stood a little girl, maybe 6 years old, holding his hand tightly, her hair tied into uneven ponytails, her shoes slightly scuffed, but her smile was bright enough to light up the entire hallway. People stared. Some whispered. "Wrong floor," one man muttered under his breath. "Probably here for maintenance," another joked. The dad didn't react. He simply walked forward calmly, holding his daughter's hand, pressing the elevator button for the 12th floor. Inside the elevator, the tension grew thicker. A group of young executives stood behind them, barely hiding their smirks. "You sure you're in the right building?" one of them said casually. The little girl looked up at her father, confused. The man smiled softly and squeezed her hand. "We are exactly where we need to be," he said quietly. The elevator doors opened. Floor 12. The most important level in the building. This was where the big meeting was happening, the one with military officials and aviation experts. The hallway buzzed with urgency, assistants rushing, laptops opening, coffee cups clinking. And there he was, standing in the middle of it all, completely out of place in their eyes. A receptionist approached him, slightly hesitant. "Sir, this floor is restricted today. Do you have an appointment?" He nodded and handed over a simple ID card. She looked at it, paused, blinked, then looked at him again, confusion mixed with disbelief. Before she could say anything, one of the executives from earlier stepped forward. "Come on, this has to be a mistake." "This guy," he laughed. Others joined in. "What is this, bring your kid to work day? Maybe he's lost." The little girl clutched her father's hand tighter. And that's when something subtle changed. The man knelt down in front of her, adjusted her backpack, and whispered something that made her smile again. Then he stood up, calm as ever. "Where is the conference room?" he asked politely. The receptionist, still unsure, pointed down the hall. As he walked, the laughter followed. Quiet at first, then louder. But he didn't turn back. Inside the conference room, things were already intense. Military officers sat at one end, serious, focused, discussing flight systems, radar coordination, and communication protocols. Among them were pilots, real pilots, the kind who flew machines most people only saw in documentaries. And then the door opened. Everyone turned. And there he was, the single dad from the hallway. Conversation stopped. One officer frowned. "Who let him in?" Another whispered, "This meeting is classified." The man stepped forward, his daughter staying close beside him. "Sorry I'm late," he said simply. That line alone triggered a ripple of disbelief. Late? Late to this meeting? One of the executives who had followed him in couldn't hold it anymore. This is ridiculous, he said loudly. This guy doesn't belong here. He walked in with a kid and thinks he can just sit with. That's enough. The voice didn't come from the dad. It came from one of the senior officers at the table. His eyes were locked, not with anger, but with recognition. Something had shifted. But no one else noticed yet. The officer leaned forward slightly. Your name, he asked the man. The dad paused, then calmly spoke it. And just like that, the room changed. It wasn't instant chaos. It wasn't dramatic shouting. It was something quieter, deeper. A ripple of realization spreading across faces, one by one. Some of the officers straightened their posture. Others exchanged quick glances. But the executives, they were still confused. What's going on? One whispered. Why is everyone suddenly acting weird? The little girl looked around, sensing the tension. Dad, are we in trouble? She whispered. He smiled gently. Not at all, he said. Then something happened that no one in that room would ever forget. Outside the building, far above, a low rumble began to grow. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't traffic. It was something sharper, faster, more precise. The kind of sound that cuts through the sky. People near the windows turned instinctively. And then they saw them. Two fighter jets slicing through the air, moving with perfect synchronization. Sleek, powerful, unmistakable. They weren't just any jets. They were F-22 Raptors. And they were flying low, very low. The entire room rushed toward the windows. What the? Why are they flying here? Is this part of the demonstration? No one had answers. The jets circled once, then aligned themselves directly in front of the building. Hovering just enough to be seen clearly through the glass walls. It was surreal. Impossible. And then, the man stepped forward. He didn't rush. He didn't show off. He simply walked to the window, stood still, and raised his hand. Not a wave. Not a salute. A signal. A precise, deliberate hand signal. Something only a few people in that room recognized. But those who did froze. The jets responded instantly. Their movement shifted, perfectly synchronized, like they had been waiting for that exact command. And then, in a motion so sharp and disciplined it sent chills through everyone watching. Both jets dipped their wings. A pilot's salute. Not casual. Not ceremonial. Formal. Respectful. The kind reserved for someone of rank. The room went completely silent. No whispers. No laughter. Just the sound of distant engines fading into the sky. The executives who had mocked him stood frozen. Their earlier confidence shattered. One of them swallowed hard. Who is he? The senior officer stood up slowly. His voice calm but firm. You don't recognize him. No one answered. The officer turned toward the man and did something that stunned everyone even more. He saluted him. A full, formal military salute. And this time there was no doubt. The man returned it. Just as precisely. Just as naturally. Like it was second nature. Because it was. The officer looked back at the room. "You're looking at a retired general," he said. The words hit like a shockwave. A general? This man. The one they laughed at. The one they questioned. The single dad with a little girl and a simple shirt. No one spoke. No one moved. Because suddenly everything made sense. The calmness. The confidence. The silence in the face of mockery. The signal. The salute. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was who he was. The little girl looked up at her father again. "Dad, why did the planes say hello to you?" A soft smile crossed his face. "Because we used to work together," he said gently. Some of the officers couldn't hide their faint smiles at that answer. But the executives. They couldn't even meet his eyes anymore. One of them stepped forward awkwardly. "Sir? We didn't know." The general raised a hand slightly. Not to dismiss them. Not to embarrass them. Just enough to stop the sentence. "You didn't need to know," he said calmly. And that line carried more weight than any lecture ever could. Because it wasn't about titles. It wasn't about rank. It was about respect. Basic human respect. Something they had failed to give. The meeting continued after that, but everything felt different. Every word carried more meaning. Every glance more awareness. And the general? He spoke only when necessary, precise, clear, focused. No ego. No need to prove anything. Because he already had. Without even trying. When the meeting ended, people left quietly. No loud conversations. No careless jokes. Just a lingering sense of something learned, something understood. As the general walked out with his daughter, the hallway that once echoed with laughter was now completely silent. People stepped aside. Not out of fear. But out of respect. Real respect. The kind that isn't demanded but earned. The little girl waved happily at a few people. Completely unaware of the impact her father had just made. And maybe that was the most powerful part of all. To her, he wasn't a general. He wasn't a legend. He wasn't someone pilots saluted in the sky. He was just her dad. The one who held her hand. The one who fixed her backpack. The one who made her feel safe. And in the end, that was the only title that truly mattered to him. So the next time you see someone who doesn't fit your expectations, someone who seems out of place, remember this story. Because you never really know who you are looking at. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one the sky itself salutes.